The transmission came from the void between galaxies, a place where nothing should exist. High Counselor stood in the great chamber of Prime and watched the holographic display with growing unease. Around him, representatives from 3,000 species fell silent as the message played again. "We are humanity, we have returned, we remember everything." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the ancient feel something he had not felt in centuries: fear. "This is impossible," said Admiral Knox, the military commander of the Council forces. "Humans went extinct 800,000 years ago. Every record confirms this." Said nothing. He knew the truth, a truth that had been buried so deep that only a handful of beings in the entire galaxy still remembered it. Humans had not gone extinct. They had been sent to die. In a small archive room on the other side of the station, an elderly scholar named was reading documents that should not exist. He had spent 300 years searching for these files, and now that he had found them, he wished he had not. The official history said humans were banished for being warmongers, savages who threatened galactic peace, but the real records told a different story. 800,000 years ago, they had discovered that Earth sat above the largest deposit of dark matter in the known universe. They wanted the planet. They demanded that humans leave there and relocate to assigned colony worlds. When humanity refused, they used their control of the Galactic Council to declare humans a dangerous species. They fabricated evidence of human aggression. They spread lies about human violence. And when the vote came, the Council agreed to banish humanity from civilized space. But banishment was not enough for They wanted humans gone forever, so they stripped them of all technology, scattered them across barren moons and dead worlds at the edge of the galaxy, and left them to die. Then they erased them from history. Closed the file and felt sick. His entire civilization had been built on a lie. In orbit above the Council station, a fleet emerged from hyperspace. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were massive, elegant, and completely silent. No engine signatures, no weapon signatures, just smooth hulls that seemed to bend light around them. Admiral Jack stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Enduring Memory, and looked at the world below. He was tall, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen more than most beings could imagine. At his side stood Ambassador Kate Morgan, a woman with dark skin and a voice that could command armies or soothe children with equal ease. 800,000 years, Jack said quietly. My ancestors dreamed of this moment. Their ancestors dreamed of it, and their ancestors before them. Kate nodded. We need to do this right. No anger, no revenge, just truth. Jack turned to his crew. Open a channel to the Council, full broadcast to every system in the galaxy. On Prime, every screen, every hologram, every communication device suddenly showed the same image: a human woman standing in a room of light. My name is Kate Morgan, she said. I am the ambassador of the new human collective. 800,000 years ago, your ancestors banished mine. They told you we were monsters. They told you we were savages who could not be trusted. They told you we had to be removed for the safety of all species. These were lies. Across the galaxy, trillions of beings watched in stunned silence. We did not die, Kate continued. We survived, we grew, we evolved, and we watched. For 800 we recorded everything, every crime, every lie, every attempt to erase us from history. We know who is responsible, we know what really happened, and now we have returned to share the truth. High Counselor felt his heart racing. This could not be happening. The humans were supposed to be dead. They were supposed to be a forgotten mistake, buried so deep that no one would ever find the truth. He activated his private channel to Admiral Knox. Destroy them, now, before they say anything more. Knox hesitated. High Counselor, we do not know their capabilities. Perhaps we should. I gave you an order. The Council fleet moved into attack formation. 300 warships, the finest in the galaxy, aimed their weapons at the human vessels. On the enduring memory, Commander Ben watched the display and almost smiled. "They are powering weapons, Admiral." Jack did not seem concerned. "Let them." The Council fleet fired. Thousands of energy beams and missiles streaked toward the human ships, and then something impossible happened. The weapons simply stopped. They hung frozen in space, suspended by forces that the Council species could not comprehend. Kate Morgan's voice continued her broadcast, calm and unshaken. "We have not come for war. We have come for justice. There is a difference, and we will teach you what that difference means." On Prime ran through the corridors toward the Council chamber. He had to tell them what he had found. He had to make them understand that the humans were not the enemy. They never had been. He burst through the door just as High Counselor was ordering a second attack. "Stop," shouted. "Stop this now. I have proof. I have the original records. The humans are telling the truth. We are the ones who committed crimes against them. We tried to kill an entire species for resources and power, and now they have come back." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to, waiting for his response. The old looked at the frozen weapons still hanging in space, at the impossible ships that his fleet could not scratch, at the human woman on every screen in the galaxy speaking truth that had been hidden for 800,000 years. And for the first time, he understood that humanity had not returned to destroy them. If they wanted destruction, it would already be over. They had returned for something far more terrifying to someone like him. They had returned to make him answer for what his ancestors had done. Kate Morgan finished her broadcast with words that would echo across the stars for generations to come. "We request a formal hearing before the full Galactic Council. We will present our evidence. We will tell our story. And then the galaxy will decide what justice looks like. We have waited 800,000 years. We can wait a little longer." The transmission ended, and across 1,000 worlds, beings began to ask questions that had never been asked before. What really happened to the humans? And what would they do now that they had returned the Council granted humanity their hearing? They had no choice. The frozen weapons still hung in space, a silent reminder of power that the galaxy could not understand. Ambassador Kate Morgan invited a small group of Council representatives to visit the human flagship. Among them was the archivist who had discovered the truth. As their shuttle approached, the enduring memory pressed his face against the viewport like a child seeing stars for the first time. The human ship was enormous, stretching for miles in every direction, but there were no visible weapons, no armor plating, nothing that looked like a warship. "What powers a vessel this size?" asked one of the diplomats. The shuttle pilot, a human woman named Lisa Grant, smiled. "Dark energy. We learned to harvest it about 400,000 years ago, changed everything." The diplomats exchanged nervous glances. Dark energy was still theoretical to most Council species. Humans had been using it for longer than many civilizations had existed. Inside the ship, Admiral Jack and Dr. Maya waited to greet their guests. Maya was the chief scientist, a small woman with kind eyes and a mind that had solved problems the Council had struggled with for. "Welcome to the enduring memory," Jack said. "We named this ship as a reminder. We never forgot what was done to us. But more importantly, we never forgot who we are." He led them through corridors of soft light and living walls that seemed to breathe with gentle energy. There were no guards, no soldiers, nothing that suggested military might. Just humans going about their lives, nodding politely to the alien visitors. "You seem surprised," Maya said too. "I expected weapons," the archivist admitted. "Armies, signs of the vengeance you must have planned for so long." Maya shook her head. "We had 800,000 years to think about what we wanted. Vengeance was considered and rejected a very long time ago. It would not bring back our dead. It would not heal our wounds. It would only create new wounds in others." They entered a vast chamber filled with floating lights. In the center stood an elderly woman who seemed both ancient and ageless. Her name was Grace, and she was 12,000 years old, the oldest living human. "I am the keeper of memory," Grace said, her voice soft but clear. "Every generation we pass down the stories, not to feed anger but to remember the lesson. Do you know what that lesson is?" Shook his head. "Survival is not enough," Grace said. "We could have spent these building weapons, planning revenge, becoming the monsters your ancestors said we were. Instead, we chose to become something better." She waved her hand, and the chamber transformed into a vision of the past. The diplomats saw humans scattered across dead worlds, starving, dying, watching their children perish in the cold darkness of space. They saw the despair, the anger, the temptation to give up. But then they saw something else. Humans helping each other, sharing the little food they had, teaching their children to read and write even when there seemed to be no future, building shelters from nothing, refusing to let go of hope. "We should have died," Grace continued. "Every calculation said we would, but we did not. We adapted, we evolved, we discovered abilities we never knew we had." The vision changed again. Now the diplomats saw humans developing powers that seemed like magic. They learned to feel the energy that flowed through the universe. They learned to live for thousands of years. They learned to travel between dimensions, to build structures in the spaces between galaxies where no one could find them. "New Eden," Jack explained. "Our home for the past 700,000 years. A civilization built in the void, hidden from everyone. We watched the galaxy from there. We saw empires rise and fall. We saw the lies about us spread and become accepted truth. And we waited." One of the diplomats, a young named Ra, spoke up. "Why did you wait so long? You clearly had the power to return centuries ago." "Because power without wisdom is destruction," Kate Morgan answered. "We needed time to heal. We needed time to decide what kind of people we wanted to be. And we needed time to gather evidence that could not be." Maya activated another display. It showed recordings, documents, genetic memories passed down through generations, physical artifacts recovered from the original banishment. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "Your ancestors tried to commit genocide," Maya said simply. "They almost succeeded, but the universe has a way of preserving truth even when powerful beings try to bury it." Watched the evidence with tears in his eyes. He had suspected the truth, but seeing it laid out so clearly broke something inside him. His entire civilization had been built on a crime so vast that it was hard to comprehend. "What do you want from us?" he asked. Grace walked toward him, moving slowly but with purpose. She took his hands in hers, and her touch was warm and gentle. "We want you to understand," she said. "We want the galaxy to know what really happened, not to shame you but to heal. Wounds that stay hidden never close. Truth is the only medicine that works." She released his hands and turned to address all the diplomats. "Tomorrow we will speak to the full council. We will present everything you have seen here and more. And then we will tell you what we want. Not revenge, not territory, not power, something far more valuable." The diplomats returned to their shuttle in silence. Each of them was processing what they had witnessed. A species that should have been destroyed had instead become something beyond comprehension. And instead of using that power for vengeance, they seemed to want something else entirely. Ra lingered at the shuttle door. He looked back at Admiral. "For what it is worth," the young said, "I am sorry. I know it means nothing coming from me, but I am sorry for what my ancestors did." Jack nodded slowly. "It means more than you know. That is exactly why we came back. Not for apologies from the guilty, but for understanding from the innocent. Your generation did not commit this crime, but your generation can help make it right." Ra boarded the shuttle, carrying those words with him. On the bridge of the enduring memory, Commander Ben stood beside his admiral and watched the shuttle depart. "Do you think they understand?" Ben asked. Jack sighed. "Some of them do, some of them will, and some of them will fight against the truth until their last breath. But that is not our problem. Our job is to speak the truth. What they do with it is up to them." He turned toward the viewport and looked at the galaxy spread out before him. 800,000 years, he said quietly. "My ancestors would be proud, not because we returned with power, but because we returned with our souls intact." Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so full. Representatives from over 3,000 species packed the massive chamber, while trillions more watched through broadcasts that reached every corner of the galaxy. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Ambassador Kate Morgan stood at the central podium, calm and composed. Beside her, Senator Amy Cole prepared the evidence they had carried across 800,000 years of exile. Behind them, Admiral Jack and Commander Ben watched in silence. High Counselor sat in his elevated seat, trying to project confidence he did not feel. Around him, the other senior council members whispered nervously. They all remembered the frozen weapons, the power they could not understand, the simple message that had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Kate Morgan began to speak. "Thank you for granting us this hearing. I know many of you have questions. I know many of you are afraid. Fear is natural when facing the unknown. But I promise you, we have not come here to cause harm. We have come here to heal a wound that has been festering for 800. She nodded to Amy Cole, who activated the evidence display. The chamber filled with holographic images, documents, and recordings. 800,000 years ago, Earth was the of humanity. We were a young species, just beginning to explore the stars. We had joined the Galactic Council only a few centuries earlier. We believed in cooperation, in peace, in the shared future of all species. The images showed Earth as it had been, blue and green and full of life. Children playing in fields, cities filled with art and music, a civilization full of hope. Then they discovered that our planet sat above the largest deposit of dark matter in the known universe. They wanted Earth. They demanded that we abandon our and relocate to colony worlds of their choosing. When we refused to surrender the only home we had ever known, they began a campaign to destroy us. The images changed. Now they showed secret meetings, forged documents, lies spreading through the council like poison. The fabricated evidence that humans were violent savages who threatened galactic peace. They bribed officials, threatened witnesses, and manipulated the council into voting for our banishment. But banishment was not enough for them. Amy Cole's voice was steady as she continued the presentation. After the vote, forces rounded up every human they could find. They stripped us of our technology, our homes, our dignity. They scattered us across the most hostile environments in the galaxy, places where survival should have been impossible. Then they destroyed 14 human colony worlds that had been established before the banishment, killing billions of innocent people. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Many species had never heard this part of the story. "We have recordings," Amy said. "We have genetic memories passed down through generations. We have physical artifacts recovered from the ruins of those worlds. The evidence is undeniable." The display showed the destruction of the colony worlds. Ships bearing markings bombarding civilian populations. Families running in terror. Children crying as their world burned around them. High Counselor rose from his seat. "These are fabrications, lies created to justify human aggression. The Council should not listen to this propaganda." But before he could say more, a voice interrupted him. It was Ra, the young who had visited the human ship. "They are not lies," Ra said, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent chamber. "I have seen the original records in our own archives. I have confirmed their authenticity myself. Everything the humans are saying is true. Our ancestors committed genocide and then erased it from history." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Accusations flew in every direction. stared at Ra with pure hatred. Guards commanded, "Arrest this traitor." Security forces moved toward Ra, but they found their path blocked by delegates from other species. For the first time the council was turning against its most powerful member. Kate Morgan raised her hand, and somehow the simple gesture brought silence to the room. "We did not come here to cause division," she said. "We came here to heal it. The crimes committed against us were terrible, but they were committed by people who have been dead for hundreds of thousands of years. We do not blame the innocent for the sins of their ancestors." Admiral Jack stepped forward. "However, we cannot allow these crimes to remain hidden. Truth must be acknowledged before healing can begin, and there must be accountability." "What do you want?" asked one of the delegates, an elderly being from a species that had remained neutral during the banishment. "Three things," Kate answered. "First, the must surrender their permanent seat on the council. They used that power to commit genocide. They should not continue to hold it. Second, the species who participated in the banishment and the destruction of our colonies must pay reparations to help us rebuild. Third, the leaders who covered up these crimes must stand trial." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And if we refuse?" Jack looked at him with calm eyes. "We have not come here to threaten you. We have come here to offer you a choice. You can accept accountability and help build a better future, or you can continue to hide from the truth and watch as the galaxy loses faith in everything the Council represents." He paused. "We have waited 800,000 years. We are very patient, but the truth cannot be buried again. Too many people have now seen it." Around the chamber, delegates were whispering to each other. The evidence was clear. The confession from Ra had confirmed it. The only question was what would happen next. Made his decision. He activated his personal communicator and sent a coded message to the military fleet waiting outside the system. "Attack," he commanded. "Destroy the human ships. Destroy all evidence of this hearing. We will not surrender to these primitives." On the enduring memory, alarms did not sound. There was no panic, no rushing to battle stations. Commander Ben simply looked at his displays and nodded. "The fleet has entered the system," he reported. 1,000 warships. Admiral did not seem concerned. "Let them come." In the council chamber, Kate Morgan continued speaking as if nothing had happened. "We know what High Counselor just ordered. We know his fleet is coming, and we want you all to watch what happens next." The chamber displays switched to show the space battle. 1,000 warships against a handful of human vessels. It should have been no contest. They fired everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, weapons that could crack planets. All of it streaked toward the human fleet. And all of it stopped. Just like before, the weapons hung frozen in space, suspended by forces that the Council could not comprehend. But this time, something else happened. The ships began to shut down. One by one, their engines failed, their weapons powered down, their life support switched to emergency mode. Within minutes, the entire fleet was drifting helplessly. "We have disabled your ships," Jack announced over an open channel. "Your crews are unharmed. Your vessels will be returned to you after this hearing concludes. We could have destroyed you. We chose not to. That is the difference between who we are and who you tried to make us." In the council chamber, stared at the display in disbelief. His fleet, the pride of military might, had been defeated without a single human firing a single shot. Kate Morgan looked at him with something that might have been pity. 800,000 years ago, you tried to destroy us because you were afraid of what we might become. Look at what we became, and look at what you are still." She turned back to the council. "We did not return for revenge. We returned for justice. Now the choice is yours." Days that followed the council hearing changed the galaxy forever. News of the human return and the evidence of ancient crimes spread to every inhabited world. Species that had lived under influence began asking questions that had never been asked before. How many other lies had they been told? How many other crimes had been hidden? President Daniel Shaw addressed the galaxy from the bridge of the enduring memory. He was a middle-aged man with a kind face and steady voice, elected by the human collective to lead them through this moment in history. "We understand that many of you are confused," he said. "You were taught that humans were dangerous. You were taught that our banishment was necessary. Learning that everything you believed was a lie is difficult. We do not blame you for what your ancestors did. We only ask that you help us build a better future." On the of Prime, the response was very different. Overseer, the commander of military forces, refused to accept what had happened. He had spent his entire life believing that his species was superior, that the council existed to serve interests, that humans had been rightfully purged from the galaxy. "We will not surrender to these creatures," announced to his remaining forces. "They may have technology we cannot understand, but they have shown weakness. They refuse to kill. They refuse to fight. That makes them prey, not predators." He gathered what ships remained on the and prepared for a final assault. Not on the human fleet, but on the council station itself. If he could not defeat the humans directly, he would destroy the evidence, kill the witnesses, and force the galaxy back to the old order. General Chris Porter watched the ships leave Prime. He was the commander of human ground forces. Though he had spent his entire career hopping, he would never need to use them. "They are heading for Prime," Chris reported to Admiral. "They are going to attack the council station." Jack nodded slowly. "How many civilians on that station?" 2 million. Representatives, staff, families. "Then we stop them, without killing anyone if possible." Chris raised an eyebrow. "They are trying to murder 2 million people, sir. Would anyone blame us if we responded in kind?" "Others might not blame us," Jack replied. "But we would blame ourselves. We spent 800,000 years deciding what kind of people we wanted to be. We are not going to abandon that in a moment of anger." The human fleet moved to intercept the forces. It was not much of a battle. The same technology that had frozen weapons and disabled ships before worked exactly as it had during the council hearing. Within minutes, the entire assault force was drifting helplessly in space. But had one final plan. He had loaded his command ship with explosives. If he could get close enough to the council station, he would destroy it himself, taking his own life in the process. His ship accelerated toward Prime, pushing its damaged engines beyond their limits. Human vessels moved to intercept, but pushed harder, burning through systems in a suicidal charge. On the enduring memory, Kate Morgan watched the display with concern. "Can we stop him without destroying his ship?" Commander Ben ran calculations. "It will be close, very close." "Do it," Admiral ordered. "Every life matters, even his." A human vessel moved into position and projected a field that slowed ship, then stopped it entirely just miles from the station. The explosives on board were neutralized by technology that could not begin to understand. Sat in his command chair, defeated. He had thrown everything he had at the humans, and they had stopped him without killing a single member of his crew. The humiliation was worse than death. The council station broadcast the entire encounter to the galaxy. Trillions watched as humans risked their own safety to protect millions of people, including many who had benefited from the lies told about humanity. President Daniel Shaw appeared on screens across the galaxy once more. "We could have let that ship hit the station," he said. "We could have used it as proof of aggression, as justification for revenge. Many would have said we were right to do so, but that is not who we are. We did not survive 800,000 years by becoming monsters. We survived by remembering our humanity, and that humanity includes protecting the innocent, even when they do not ask for our protection." On Prime, something unexpected began to happen. The people, watching their military fail again and again while humans refused to respond with violence, began to question everything. Protests erupted in major cities. Citizens demanded answers from their leaders. How could humans be the savages they had been taught about when they showed more mercy than any leader ever had? High Counselor tried to flee the planet. He had hidden accounts on a dozen worlds, ships waiting to take him to safety in uncharted space. But his own people found him first. Citizens captured their leader and held him for human authorities. When the news reached the council station, it spread through the galaxy like fire. The people had rejected their corrupt leadership. They had chosen truth over lies, accountability over denial. Ra led a delegation to the human fleet. He carried a message from the new government. "We surrender to you," he told Ambassador Kate Morgan. "We ask that he stand trial for his crimes, and we ask that you judge us not by what our ancestors did, but by what we choose to do now." Kate looked at the young who had risked everything to speak truth in the council chamber. "That is exactly what we wanted," she said. "Not blind revenge, but genuine accountability. Not punishment for the innocent, but justice for the guilty." President Shaw announced the terms that humanity would accept, and the other leaders who had hidden the truth would stand trial. They would surrender their permanent council seat. Reparations would be paid to rebuild the memorial worlds, but no citizen would be harmed. No children would pay for their parents' crimes. No cycle of vengeance would begin. Other species who had participated in the original banishment came forward one by one. Some confessed willingly, ashamed of what their ancestors had done. Others were exposed by their own citizens, who had grown tired of living under the shadow of ancient lies. Each species was judged individually. Those who confessed and cooperated were treated with mercy. Those who tried to hide or resist faced stricter consequences. But in every case, humanity drew a line between the guilty and the innocent, the powerful and the powerless. General Chris Porter never deployed his ground forces. The victory humanity had waited 800,000 years for was won without a single battle, without a single death, without a single act of revenge. "I trained my whole life for a war that never happened," Chris told Admiral. "I cannot decide if that makes me a failure or the luckiest soldier in human history." Jack smiled. "It makes you exactly what we needed, the threat of force without the use of it, the ability to fight paired with the wisdom not to. That is the true strength of humanity." Across the galaxy, beings who had feared human return began to see them differently. These were not the savages of ancient propaganda. These were people who had been wronged in the worst possible way and had chosen to respond with justice instead of vengeance. And somehow, that was more terrifying and more inspiring than any weapon could ever be. 1 year had passed since humanity returned to the galaxy. In that time, everything had changed. The trials were complete, and 17 other leaders who had hidden the truth about human banishment were found guilty and imprisoned. They would spend the rest of their lives answering for crimes that had been buried for 800. But the story did not end with punishment. It ended with healing. Ambassador Kate Morgan stood in the newly rebuilt human embassy on Prime. The building was simple but beautiful, designed to welcome visitors rather than intimidate them. Through the windows, she could see ships from dozens of species orbiting peacefully above the council station. "It is strange," she said to Admiral Jack, who had come to visit before his retirement. "For so long, our entire purpose was to return, to reveal the truth, to make things right. Now that it is done, I wonder what comes next." Jack smiled. "Life comes next, the kind of life our ancestors could only dream about. A life where we are not hiding, not planning, not waiting, just living." The 14 lost colony worlds had been transformed into memorial sites. Each planet bore monuments built by the species who had destroyed them, permanent reminders of the cost of hatred and lies. Humans visited these worlds to remember their dead, but they did not come to mourn. They came to celebrate survival. On Earth, something miraculous was happening. The planet that had been abandoned for 800,000 years was coming back to life. Human technology had reversed centuries of neglect, healing poisoned oceans and restoring barren lands. Trees grew where deserts had spread. Animals returned to forests that had been silent for. Elder Grace, 12,000 years old and the keeper of human memory, walked through a field of wildflowers on a restored continent. She moved slowly, supported by two young humans who had never known any home except New Eden, but her eyes were bright with tears of joy. "My grandmother told me stories about Earth," Grace said softly. Stories her grandmother had told her. For generations, we passed down these memories, keeping them alive when there was no hope of ever returning. And now I am here. I am walking on the soil of our. She knelt and pressed her hands into the dirt, feeling the connection to ancestors who had lived and died dreaming of this moment. "We made it," she whispered. "After everything they did to us, we made it home." The young humans helped her stand, and together they watched as the sun set over mountains that had waited 800,000 years for humans to see them again. In the council chamber, a new session was beginning. Ambassador Kate Morgan had been offered a permanent seat, the first time any species had been given such an honor since the original founding of the council. She had accepted on one condition. "We propose a new law," Kate announced to the assembled representatives. "No species shall ever be banished from civilized space again. Disputes must be resolved through mediation and justice, not exile and erasure. And all council decisions must be preserved in an unalterable archive that no government can hide or destroy." The vote was unanimous. 3,000 species agreed to change the fundamental structure of galactic civilization. What had been done to humanity would never be done to anyone else. Ra, now the leader of the reformed government, spoke after the vote. "My ancestors committed a terrible crime," he said. "For 800,000 years, my people lived with the benefits of that crime without ever knowing the truth. We cannot undo what was done, but we can honor the beings who suffered by building a better future. That is the lesson humanity has taught us. Vengeance destroys, justice heals." President Daniel Shaw watched the ceremony from New Eden, the great civilization that humans had built in the void between galaxies. Around him, humans were preparing for the greatest migration in history. After so long in hiding, they were finally free to spread across the stars. "Will we keep New Eden?" asked Dr. Maya, who stood beside him. "Of course," Daniel replied. "It is part of who we are now, but it will no longer be a hiding place. It will be a home we choose, not a refuge we need." On the enduring memory, Admiral Jack prepared for his final voyage. He had spent his entire career building toward this moment, and now that it had arrived, he found himself at peace. Commander Ben would take his place. A new generation of humans would lead their people into this new era, but Jack wanted one last mission before he retired. "Take us to Earth," he ordered. The flagship made the journey in silence. When they arrived, Jack stood at the viewport and looked at the blue and green world that his ancestors had been forced to leave so long ago. "We did it," he said to no one in particular. "We returned with our souls intact. We won without becoming monsters. Every generation that came before us hoped for this moment, and we did not disappoint them." He thought about all the humans who had lived and died during those 800,000 years. The ones who starved on barren moons but kept their children alive. The ones who discovered dark energy and changed everything. The ones who chose mercy when revenge would have been so easy. Every single one of them had contributed to this victory. Below, on the restored Earth, human children were playing in fields that had been dead for. They laughed and ran without fear, without hiding, without any memory of the long exile that had shaped their species. Grace watched them play. She had lived long enough to see the end of the journey, and she would live long enough to see the beginning of the next chapter. But for now, she was content to simply enjoy the moment. Kate Morgan joined her in the field. "The council has invited us to participate in a new project," Kate said. They want to build a memorial to commemorate the day humans returned, something that will last forever. Grace shook her head. No monuments, no statues, the best memorial is this. She gestured at the children playing, at the flowers blooming, at the sky filled with ships from species who had once been taught to fear humanity. Life, that is what we should remember. Life that refused to end. Life that chose to heal instead of destroy. Kate nodded. She understood. Across the galaxy, the story of human return became legend. Species told their children about the beings who had been wronged so badly but had responded with wisdom and mercy. They taught them about the power of truth, the strength of patience, and the courage it takes to forgive. Humanity did not conquer the galaxy. They did not seek revenge or dominance. They simply took their place among the stars, one species among thousands, remarkable not for their power but for their heart. And when beings asked what humanity wanted, what had driven them to survive 800,000 years of exile and emerge with their spirits unbroken, the answer was always the same. They wanted to come home. They wanted to tell the truth. And they wanted to prove that the darkness of the past did not have to define the light of the future. 800,000 years after humans were banished, they returned. And the price the galaxy paid was not in blood or tears. It was in something far more valuable. It was in truth.